The law of the kingdom is the law. It's called Dina de Malchuta Dina. It's a subject that the rabbis discuss at length since most of the time in diaspora, in the Jewish life worldwide, the Jews were always under the authority of different government, different dictator, different ruler. How far people should go, for example, when it's come to paying taxes. Imagine, for example, in a broader question, while the ruler persecuted the people, and in most of the times in those painful part of Jewish history, the Jews were not allowed to engage with regular manner of work. It was always decree against them in most of the places, especially during those horrible years of the persecution in Europe. How far will go by the rule that the law of the kingdom is the law? Especially you have situations that people feel that they overcharge them, they charge them for no reason, they force them to have double books or to behave to survive in dishonesty, etc. This is one of the broader questions among the rabbis. Some society, for example, structure the government in a certain way that people have to pay those taxes in order to not only to be as good citizens, but to follow the proper structure. Ish et re'ehu chaim bla'o, the Mishnah said in the ethics, that if you do not support the government, you do not support the structure of the government, people will swallow alive each other. So the big question is, where exactly is the balance between being honest and paying the taxes the person have to, versus a situation that the rabbis give you a room to circumvent the system. It's part of this Mishnah and this Gemara of today's discussion. Another subject, again, painful subject, is called Dvarim Shebalev. Person says something, but in his heart of hearts, he meant something else. For example, a person sees that a building, his building is burning, God forbid. So he said, okay, all the valuable are for tzedakah. And then somehow the fire people came, and the building is good. Is he obligated to pay it? Or if a person was under a robbery, he was forced by the authority or by people or by individual who's a collector to make a statement or to say something, and his heart he doesn't mean it. How far you go by the person's verbal commitment versus what he come before us and he said, that's what I meant. Time allows, we're also going to discuss the issue of selling synagogue. Part of the painful Jewish history is the idea of a Jew who's not in Eretz Israel. You settle in one place, and the moment you settle, you're already thinking, where's the next place I'm going to be? Because that's part of our people's wandering. So, unfortunately, if the neighborhood turns sour, and or people passed, or other reasons, there is a need. They see a vacant building, God forbid, of a synagogue, and they want to sell it. Can you sell it to, for example, to a supermarket? Can you sell it for a regular other purposes? How far you go with the consecration of building and dedication? There is a concept called Kedushat Haguf. What does that mean? When a person, for example, contributed an offering to Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, So the moment you consecrated an animal, the animal has which we call a consecration, independent concentration, because it is the sanctity of the body itself. Usually there is a concept of pidyon, meaning if you have a large field of oranges trees, for example, you live in Eretz Israel and you need to bring the temple, the tithe, so you're allowed to sell them, take the money, and the substitute of that money goes to Jerusalem and go and further on do whatever needed with that pidyon, with that money. But if something carry kedushat haguf, the sanctity of itself, how far you go. So in general, this upcoming Mishnah dealing with the concept of making vow, consecration of things, if it's under pressure, under something beyond person's control, or something that the person not intend. So we're going to study today Mitzvah page 28. We'll start in 27b at the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Nodrin laharagin. A person can make a vow to a murderers. There are few views in this statement. There is one view, the Shita Mikubetzet, and there is another view of others, like the Ritva. Is that continuation of the previous Mishnayot subject, which is Nidrei Onasim, Nedarim, vows that the person made in a state of something that beyond his control, or it's after we learn different type of Nedarim or vow that you do not need a sage to annul it. Now we go to the next step, which is a person lechatchila, even of the first place, allowed to make a neder, allowed to make a vow, even he has the total intent not to fulfill this vow. You hear that? So for example, if there is a murderer, people come, pull out the gun, you selling a jewelry, right? They get to your office, they pull out the gun, etc. And you make a vow. Or ulecharmin. So there are a few views. Either the Rosh said that lozu avzu, that which means both of them, a haragin, murderer, and plunderers. But the idea is that people who are either tax collector, the problem with them over the years, think about old Russia, think about third world, think about some countries in West Africa, okay? Think about certain countries in South America. So you know the guys who come to collect taxes, they don't give that money to the government, right? So you figured out that these people are taking money from you not because you have to pay it and you need to pay it, right? And that money will not be registered in any form. So you can make a vow in advance that you don't even meant that vow, because the whole scenario was not a scenario, committed scenario. Vela mochsin, so the same that either they make up their own rules, or those tax collectors, the king make its own rules that it's not rational always. So then they said shehit truma, which means even though that these people are either murderers, plunderers, etc., you are not in a violation of eating consecrated items that prohibited to a foreigners who are not Kohen, because the Tosfot explain either it's because it belongs to the Kohanim, or in some case you said to them, it belongs to the Kohanim, so maybe they leave you alone, right? So, af al pi she'eino truma, meaning you said to them, oh, this is, it's not mine, it belongs to the Kohanim. And the truth is, it's not. But you know why you're saying that? Because you figured out they're going to just abuse you or take it for no reason, right? Shehen shel beit hamelech af al pi she'inan shel beit hamelech. You said to the guy, that belongs to the authority, that belongs to the king. Imagine if it's old Russia. So they said to them, that's the KGB was here yesterday and they said that they're about to take it tomorrow, right? So the point is, you declare something that it's not correct, but later you see it's because anyway those people are crooks and they just want to take it from you, etc. So there are several rabbis, ancient rabbis, early rabbis, that they have a disputation how far you go with this. In general, if it's someone who is a murderer, who is plunders, who is a incorrect tax collector, we understand. For example, in the old Europe, if you go close to our days, it was early 19th century, it's called Vaad Arba Aratzot. It was the government that appointed Jews like a couples, that basically they knew that there are some people who are hiding money, or etc. So they basically wanted to have a fellow Jew that inform another one, and this way to get more information, more money. And it was not because they really deserved to get that money. It was basically looking for informers, right? So the question is how far you go with this. It's a story about the Rabbi Chaim of Brisk, the great Lithuanian rabbi, that it was in those years the fellow that was known in the modern days, the head of the mafia, the head of the thieves. And he invited the fellow Jew to come for him for a special meal. And the fellow was afraid, I don't know if he's going to serve me kosher, he claimed something, I don't know if it's true, etc., etc. So Reb Chaim said, let me check it. He called that guy, and he said, I want to talk to you. So he came and he said to him, okay, when you go to someone and you see something that belongs to him, what do? He said, I steal it. Okay, why? Because that's the way I make a living. If you saw someone that you can do it on Shabbat, can you do it? Yes, I do it on Shabbat even, because I'm making a living. That's my parnasa, that's my living. Then Reb Chaim asked him, so how about if you see a large piece of meat, expensive meat, right? And that meat is non-kosher meat. You steal it. Yes, sure. And what are you going to do? Can you sell it to a Jew? No, 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 no. That I'll never do. What I'll do, I'll sell it to another one. Right? So after he left, Reb Chaim said to a fellow, you can eat by him. You know why? As much as this guy, he is a ganav and he is a terrible guy, but there are certain areas that he's not crossing. Anyway, here they said, Beit Shammai Omri. Beit Shammai tells us, Bakol Nodrin. One may vow in such a case, although he has no intention that his word be true, he said, using every means of talking a vow or making a prohibition in order to mislead those people. So it means in every language of commitments. 28, chutz mibishvu'ah, except for by taking an oath. The Ran explained to us, it's because the Torah said in Aseret HaDibrot, in the Ten Commandments, Ki lo yenakeh Hashem et asher yisa et shmo lashav, because the Almighty will not expunge, not erase that sin of someone who pronounced his name in vain. So therefore, a person should be careful with oath. You see here that we differentiate between oath and vow. Oath is way serious, and the rabbis are not allowed to take an oath even for those purposes which is untrue, needed. You can take a vow but not an oath. ובית הלל אומרים אף בשבועה. בית הלל said that it's allowed, and the Ritva explains that one may list them by even by taking an oath, that it means that a person take a vow that I will not derive benefit from any produce, even if they are not some that belong to the authority or belongs to the Truma. The Meiri disagreed with the Ritva, and he said that he allowed to make an oath that belongs to the king. That's the view of Beit Hillel. Another disputation between these two, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai אומרים לו יפתח לו בנדר. Beit Shammai hold that one should not initiate the offer to the robber to prove his assertion with a vow. Meaning, if the guy did not offer by itself the robber, you should not propose him, you should not offer him. Because the only way that we allow it is honest, if it's beyond the control of a person. ובית הלל אומרים אף יפתח לו. בית הלל said that he may even initiate by taking a vow to him. Third disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai אומרים במה שהוא מדירו, which means that even that fellow, the tax collector, ask, you should go specifically by what he asks you, and not exceeding more than that. Because the Rosh explained, the additional, it's not considering a noose, it's not beyond your control. ובית הלל אומרים, אף במה שאין מדירו. But let's say that a person can take a vow even about what does not compel him to take a vow. כיצד? Here they give us an example. אמר לו, אמור קונם אשתי נהנית לי. If the tax collector said to the robber, in a sense, said to him, Ekonam, that which my wife will benefit from me, if the produce is not truma. ואמר, קונם אשתי ובניי נהנים לי. And he said, Konam, which my wife and children will benefit from me if the produce is not truma. So, which means he add to that form of neder also his sons. Beit Shammai אומרים, אשתו מותרת ובניו אסורים. Beit Shammai said his wife is permitted to benefit from him, since he vowed to forbid her at the robber behest. But his children are forbidden to have benefit from him, since he declared that part of the vow voluntarily. ובניו אסורים. בית הלל אומרים, אלו ואלו מותרים. בית הלל said, both these and those are permitted to benefit from him. Why? Because even the additional part, it's considering as part of the vow. When it's come to the murder, when it's come to the plumber, in order to save his money, this fellow believed that since he add more to his vow, it's not a real vow. So the Nimukei Yosef said that make it more believable. The Kernora and the Rashash elaborate and said, if you follow Beit Hillel, if you remember yesterday and day before yesterday we said, Neder she'utar mikzato, if you have a vow that you release, you dissolve in part, hutar kulo, so the whole vow is permitted. So here you have a situation that it's not considering a vow. Why? Because the person does certain things to save his assets, to save his money. So the question is, Gemara asks, Amar Shmuel Dina de Malchuta Dina. We say that the halachic principle is that the Jew must obey the law of the state in which they live. So if you have the obligation to pay taxes that are determined by the authority, why the rabbis permit one to lie in order to avoid paying? So you should know there's a lot to speak about it. Rabbeinu Nisim, the Ran, said that the foundation of this idea of the law of the kingdom is the law, it's because everything belongs to the king. And he can deport anybody he wished to. So therefore, it's like his own home, his own authority. Versus, for example, in our ancient time, that was a king of Israel that lived in the land of Israel, so that's not applied because everyone has a part of the land, everyone. But there are those who say that even in that condition it's not, the king can rules. In general, take for example the history of Europe. You have King Louis of France, right? So he declared that he's God and he is the ruler. So the land is his. Henry VIII, right? In England. You have all kind of kings that declare that the emperor in Spain, right? You have different names of kings that declare that that's their own. So on one hand you said that it was a structure of society, as we said, remember the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, that if you don't have a government, a person will swallow each other alive. So you have to have a structure of society, but here you have the issue that how far you go with this. The obligation of the law of the king is the law, is a strong obligation. So how you allow him to make this type of statement or vow? As a side note, you should know that we have nowadays the copies of the Vilna Shas, the Vilna Talmud. And we are so fortunate that it's no longer the censor. But if you look at the Gemarrah that passed to the Christian censor in the past, they erase big part of what we study today. Not just that, even the commentary of the Ran in part was erased. Anyway, Amar Rav Chinana, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Shmuel, B'moches she'en lo kitzva. That's applied to a tax collector, that there is no set of limit to the amount that he collects. So Shmuel rules that the law of the kingdom is the law, does not apply to such a tax. Right? So it means you have a situation that this guy, this tax collector, he bought from the government his right to be the tax collector. Local sheriff, local tax collector. But this guy, since he bought the right over his village, he make a decision to each person how much he wants to collect. And he make it very without always the consideration. It's just his idea. The Rosh and Ritva and others said that that's the problem, because there's no real justice the way that he make up his rules. Others said, like Rabbeinu Avraham Nahar and others said, he is taking more than the authority asked him to take, and either he put some in his pocket or he tried to ingratiate himself to the authorities, so he's taking more than they ask him. But the idea is, it's not the right one. Tosfot Yeshanim said that he basically take more than the authority asked him to take. And why he does that? Either because he dislikes certain people or he make his own rules. So the big question is considering Zela de Malchuta, Tosfot said that it means that you are stealing on the title that you are part of the authority or not. So Amar Rav Chinana, Amar Rav Kana, Amar Shmuel, b'moches she'en lo kitzvah. That's the story. It's Napoleon. Remember the story of Napoleon? Napoleon said the country, the army needs three things, right? They needs money, and they needs money, and they needs money, right? Anyway, another explanation is Dever Rabbi Yanai Amar b'moches ha'omed me'elav. That this guy is a self-appointed tax collector who hold no authority from the king to collect taxes. Well, there is a big discussion in the code Choshen Mishpat 369 how far you go. Even, I don't know if you guys remember, but you go to certain, I don't want to mention names, but certain places in South America, right? They put you aside, they pull you aside, the police, right? So you know already you can give them either cash or you give them chocolate, gums, or other things, and they let it go, right? Sometimes, what is guy? Remember Rafael used to say that he would rent a car and they stop him a few times, he drove exactly the way the law required, and they didn't release him. His friend said, pull out some cash, give it to them, which he did, and they let him go, right? So here's the here's the problem. So, yeah, you're dealing with crooks, so why should you feel like these guys, either they're not appointed or they appointed themselves, they make their own rules, right? So the whole idea of the law of the land is the law. You can say that that's applied if the law of the land is a fair, balanced law. But if they make their own rules, that's a different story. Those of you who travel to places, not only South America, but you can go to other places, in Africa, in other those countries, you see that the way that they give you a ticket or collect taxes or things, it many times is just for themselves. It's nothing to do with the rules and rights, right? Anyway, a friend of mine went to the city of Tijuana, which is the border of what is it, San Diego and Mexico. So they stop him at the airport, and he doesn't know what's the problem. He is an IT person. He came to do, and he tried to have a travel that costs less. So he traveled to there. So to make long story short, he called the rabbino. He called the rabbi. So the rabbi told him in Hebrew, give them something. So he opened his luggage. He gave them some chocolate, some gums, jeans, whatever it is, and they let him go, right? Anyway, shehen shel Beit HaMelech, right? In Panama too? No. All right. Anyway,
all days. Yes.
All days.
Yeah. No.
But I think in some countries nowadays, what is named? Moshe told me in Ecuador. In a certain part of Chile, they said, I don't know, they said in certain countries is still.
When I was a kid in Panama, some of the police used to eat with the American because they know they have
tourists.
The GI, they speeding or they catch them smoking reefer. Then they just give them a 6-pack of beer, they carry beer in the car and they will give them a 6-pack and they let them go.
Yeah, but the beer is cheap.
Yeah,
sometimes they want cash.
Yeah.
Anyway, shehen shel Beit HaMelech. ואף על פי שאינן של בית המלך. Right? So these guys, it's a היכן נדר, אמר רב אמרן אמר רב באומר, יאסרו פירות העולם עליי, אם אינן של בית המלך. So the idea is, he said, the whole world, the produce of the whole world should be forbidden to me if this produce does not belong to the house of the king. So it's a big question among the rabbis in nowadays. How far you go with this? Some countries, you go to Denmark, you go to other countries, the kingdom is symbolic, right? Some countries is obligatory. So how far you go with this type of statements? It's a very serious discussion. But they said, Kevan de Amar Yasru, Itzar alei kol perei alma, since he used this term, so any produce in the world are forbidden to him. So they said, Be'omer hayom. You know what? He expressed it in the word that the produce prohibited to him that day. So therefore the neder fulfilled that day, and later on it's okay. Ida amar hayom lo mekabel minei moches. So what's the issue? So the tax collector or the robber will surely not accept this vow from him as a proof that his assertion is true. So they said, oh, ואומר בליבו היום, ובוציא בשפתיו סתם. So in his heart of heart, he meant to say, what? Today, right? But he uttered out of his mouth general statement without saying today. So the tax collector or the robber understand that he meant to say forever, right? But since he said in his heart that day, אף על גב דסבירן, דברים שבלב אינם דברים, even though we said the word that the heart is not considering your words, which means if ones have unexpressed thought, they have no legal power to define or qualities, spoken words or actions. לגבי אונסים, shani. When it's circumstances beyond his personal control, it's a different story. So therefore, you're allowed to rely on the mental stipulation that you added in order to limit the duration of the prohibition affected by the vow. So you see here a very clear distinction of the term of honest, of beyond personal control. The Rana said that when the witnesses come and said, Anan Sahadei, we are witness, that it was a total beyond his control, then it's a different story. But in general, we don't take something in the person's heart as a commitment. But here we have no choice. So the Chavat Yair, it's a great rabbi that have a responsa in that. He says, a person, imagine, you're selling a property. You commit yourself to sell it nothing less than $380,000. Okay, and time passed, and then you said, you know what I meant? I meant to say only for the month of June, but I didn't meant that forever. Only today. I didn't meant. So based on our discussion here, since he came and he said, I meant to say in my heart only for a certain period of time, for example, only today or only this month, you have a big discussion if dvarim shebalev, if something that is in a person's heart, it's considering a significance or not. The Mishnah said, Beit Shammai omrim bakol. Beit Shammai said in everything you can use the term of oath, excluding term of vow, excluding an oath. And Beit Hillel said even an oath. Beit Shammai said you should not open with the matter of vow. Beit Hillel said even matter of vow. Beit Shammai אומרים במה שהוא מדירו, ובית הלל אומרים אף בשאינו מדירו. So Beit Shammai said the vow is permitted with regards to something that he expressed, demand him to vow. But they said even without, כיצד? Give me an example. אמר לו, קונם אשתי נהנית לי, ואמר קונם אשתי ובניים נהנים לי, בית שאומרים אשתו מותרת ובניו אסורים, בית אומרים אלו ואלו מותרים, הוא expanded in the Mishnah. So אמר רב הונא תנא, בית שאומרים לא יפתח לו בשבועה, ובית אומרים לא יפתח לו בשבועה. So Beit Shammai said you should not start the discussion with an oath, but says you can do it. So the Beit Shammai b'shvoah u'do lo yiftach lo, which means when they come to this tax collector, you should not start with an oath. בנדר, when it's come to a vow, יפתח לו, you can start. והתנן, בית שאומרים לו יפתח לו בנדר, we said in the Mishnah that you should not start with the matter of vow, ו-2 and further on, מי יפתחו דלא יפתח לו בשבועה? To beginning this conversation with the tax collector, we should not start with the matter of oath. המידר נדר בשבועה. But when it's come to a vow with an oath, if the robber demands it, you can do it. So they said, "Vatnan beit Shammai bakol nodrim chutz b'shvua." Beit Shammai said, you can take all the manner of vow, excluding a matter of, except an oath, which is forbidden even the robber demands it. So he said, we have two contradictions between the Mishnah and the Braita. So the Gemara said, Tana matnitin beneder lo odiacha kochan de Beit Shammai, v'tana Braita b'shvua lo odiacha kochan de Beit Hillel. So the reason is the Mishnah told the halacha pertain to vow to convey to you that far-reaching nature of opinion of Beit Shammai, who say that one may not initiate even with a vow. But the Braita follow the Beit Hillel, which is the convey, the oath, far-reaching nature way of Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel hold that initiating even with an oath is permitted. So this show the each party kohan, the far-reaching nature. Rav Ashi goes differently. Rav Ashi said, Rav Ashi amar, הכי בית שמאי אומרים אין שאלה בשבועה, ובית הלל אומרים יש שאלה בשבועה. בית שמאי said that there is no allowance for request to the solution of an oath, and Beit Hillel said that there is allowance to request a solution for an oath. So here is an example of practical halachot from this. If someone wants to borrow money from a gmach, from a free Hebrew loan, and they said, okay, you can have this, but you have to take a vow that if you don't pay, you cannot eat any more produce, for example. And if you don't pay on time, and it turns that the person did not pay on time. So now the question is, can he get the solution for that? Since he said in my heart, I didn't meant it. Why? Because I was forced. I was in a situation that I was desperate for funds, so I make that commitment. So Moshe Feinstein asked, based on that, a question. Question is, we have these shochatim, these butchers, slaughterers. So it was one shochet that was very good, and the community hired him independently to do shechita for them. And they asked him to take a vow that he will not do any shechita, any matter of slaughtering to anybody else. And they make it in such a way that if you do that, you are prohibited to eat any produce. And it turns that they caught him doing it for others. So he said, I was forced, I want to make a living, I was forced to make that commitment, but I meant in my heart only that day, not in the future. So Moshe Feinstein said that it's not acceptable. It's not considering honest beyond the person's control. And you have chalot neder, that vow is fulfilled. Because, as we said, something in your heart, dvarim shebalev einam dvarim. Next Mishnah is dealing with something that's called ke'ein honest. So there is a different view, is if that's connected to the previous Mishnayot with the 4 type of Nedarim or not. Anyway, person see a very strong wind, the Rosh said, and he feels that that's going to, is like a hurricane, God forbid, tornado, and he feels that that's going to knock out all of his trees. Or he sees a fire coming out. So he feels that that will burn his clothing. So he makes this type of vow. הרי נטיעות האלו קורבן אם אינם נקצצות. טלית זו קורבן אם אינה נשרפת. So he said, at least this sapling be consecrated as a temple offering until they are felled. Or let this talit be consecrated as a temple offering until it burn. And the question is, so now they are consecrated, and they said, yesh lahem pidyon. So basically you can transfer it in their money and buy an offering. That's the way Tosfot and Rosh said. Next circumstance, הרי נטיות אלו קורבן עד שיקצצו, טלית זו קורבן עד שתישרף. So Moshe Feinstein asked a question. This concept of Kedushat HaGuf, the idea of the sanctification of the body, if you talk about animal, so this consecration applies as long as the animal is alive. If the animal is dead, so you don't have Kedushat HaGuf. So he asked, how about the synagogue? If you have an empty building, God forbid, so you can compare it in a sense to a consecrated animal. He says as long as the animal is alive, so it's carried a kedusha. If it's no longer, so if the building is empty, it doesn't carry that kedusha. So he said the same way that it's a betrothed. You have men and women that she betrothed herself to a man. If he's no longer among the living, so that is no longer in effect. You don't have the shi'abud haguf. So therefore, based on this notion, the Moshe Feinstein said that you're allowed to go ahead and sell. For sure, we need to ask in each circumstance how and what. But in general, based on this Mishnah, he ruled that way. 28b, ein lahem pidyon. So they are not redeemed. So the Gemara explained what does that mean. What's the difference between this one and the previous example in the Mishnah? So they said, as long as they, for example, the tree was cut, you can do the redemption. But the problem is, if you redeem it, so you return to the same consecration situation. So the same apply in the talit. Anyway, balitnei kdushot ve'en kdushot. Either by the mitnasef and the pidyon, tan nereisha yesh lahem pidyon. Okay, we need running out of time. Okay, heiche dami, heiche nadar. הבר המימר בו אומר, אם אינן נקצצות היום, ועבר היום ולא נקצצו. אם כן, למה למימר פשיטה? לא צריכה, אלא כגון דאיקה זיקה נפשה. It's a terrible wind, it's like a tornado, a hurricane. So he is concerned that it's cut off all the trees. So they say, וקטן לגבי תלית לשרפה קיימה. אין כגון דאיקה דלקה. הכנה מדאיקה זיקה נפשה. לסגל דמאסיק הדעת לא מתנצלנו, משום אחר כנדר כמה שמלן. So you see that it's about to have a big fire. So he figured out, okay, I'm consecrating everything. And then it turns that it's saved. So the what?
It's consecrated.
Right? So it's a true story that happened to a great rabbi, Posek in England, Chelkat Yaakov. Anyway, the story is, after our people went through a Holocaust, which for sure traumatized our people, so it was a great level of naivete of people who are gullible after the war, and they felt the Mashiach is going to come right now. So the fellow survived, he lost everything. So he came to England and he basically opened a business and he started putting aside large sum of money for the Beit HaMikdash, with a very sincere intent that that money should be for building the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. The problem is that money accumulated and the Mashiach wasn't there yet. So it was the issue of Me'ilah, it was the issue of misuse. They consecrated the state. So he come and he asked Chelkat Yaakov, what you do? So he allowed him to do pidyon, which means not to use that money, but to substitute that money by an expensive item, for example, expensive coin, or something that accumulate all the wealth in one coin. So in that sense you can avoid misuse of that item. But again, in general, the whole idea of something that was consecrated for a certain purpose, you cannot use it for any other purposes. But here the chidush is that he allow him to use even pruta, even something that is just a coin, as long as it's carry that value.
ויחם לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי